Hello and welcome to my September wrap-up. This is going to be my first wrap-up on this channel and I'm both nervous and excited. This month I have 9 books to talk to you about, so I'll just get right into it. The first book I finished in September was My Husband's Secret by Lillian Moriarty. So I mostly read this in August. You know, in the summer months I tend to want to read contemporary and books, so I just did some research and I found this book. So yeah, this is a story of a woman. It's set in suburban Australia, and she finds a letter in the attic from her husband addressed to her, saying to please not open until after my death. And she just can't help herself and she decided to open it, and it changed her whole life. And at the same time, there's stories of 2 other women and they interconnect with what she found out in the letter. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's exactly what I wanted in a contemporary. It wasn't too fluffy, and I kept wanting to read the story and to find out what happened. She has quite a few other books that I am planning to check out, probably not until the next spring or summer. So the second book I read is another contemporary. This time it's YA, and it's By Your Side by Casey West. And so I heard about this author also on BookTube. I've seen I've seen several book reviews about her books. So this By Your Side is a story of a girl that gets trapped in a library overnight, and she gets trapped in there with another boy from school that she doesn't really know, and he's like the mysterious guy. So I read it based on that premise, and it was just okay. The writing style was very simple, a little bit too simple for me. It read more like an really young adult, so like 13 or 14. And the part about the library is only like the first half of the book, and then they get out of the library and it goes on from there. So I wasn't that impressed by it, so I only gave it 3 stars, and I don't think I'm gonna check out any of her other books. She doesn't seem like the author for me. So so the third book I read was The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. I've read War of the Worlds many years ago, and I really enjoyed that. And since now we're getting into the fall months, I really want to get back into reading classics, so I downloaded the audiobook from Liverbox, which is a free service where people record books that are in the public domain. So it's a pretty short book, and this is a story of the Invisible Man. So this guy in England in the late 1800s figures out how to become invisible, and he ends up doing some nice, not very good things, and people have to try and catch him. So I really like this. I really like the story, and I like how people talk about the Invisible Man, and people figure out that something's going on, and it shows up in the papers, and that was the only way that you would get your news at the time. So yeah, it's a pretty short book, and if you like science fiction, I suggest you check it out, and I gave that 4 stars. So the 4th book I read this month was Don't You Cry by Mary Kubica. So this book is about a girl that lives in downtown Chicago, and her name is Esther, and she goes missing, and then her roommate Quinn is trying to find out what happened to her, and she finds this very strange letter that she wrote, and she tries to uncover what happened to her. And at the same time, there's another narrative of a guy named Alex in a small town outside of, like, maybe 2 hours away from Chicago, and he's a recent high school graduate who decided not to go to college because he wouldn't need to look after his alcoholic father. So he's working at a diner and still stayed in his small town while everybody else left. And he meets this mysterious girl and quickly is obsessed with her, and she ends up living in an abandoned house across the street from him for reasons, for not spoiling, but the house plays a part in the story. So I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. It's like a thriller, but I just didn't care. Like, when you read a thriller, you want to find out what happens, and I just didn't really care. It's just really poorly written. So the roommate Quinn finds out something about Esther, and she like jumps to conclusions, and is like immediately thinks that her roommate did this, even though before she was saying that her roommate is the best person, and then she finds out something else, and she quickly changes her mind, and I'm just like, okay. And then just Alex, the guy's part, I just didn't care about his story. He just went on and on about not having his mother, and it's just poorly written. Like, I was disappointed because this was recommended. Quite a few people in BookTube really enjoyed this book, and that's why I picked it up, because I really want to read more thrillers, especially now in October, and I just didn't care. And it's just, there are parts where like Alex talks about how something happened in the past, and he repeats this. Well, this happened before I was born, and I didn't know about it. I didn't know about what happened, and he maybe said that like 3 times, and he said that, and then because of that, of him not knowing what happened, it plays an important part in the finale. And I just, like I said, to me, I was reading it, and I literally said, like, I get it, okay, I get it. You didn't know this happened before. Like, can we move on? And like, I had the audiobook, and it took me forever to get through. And usually, if there's parts in the audiobook I don't like, I just listen to it because I'm doing other things. But I had to speed up the recording because I just wanted to finish it. So yeah, I'm not impressed, and I don't think I'm gonna check out this author's other works. So I only gave it 2 stars. So the 5th book I read was Alice Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Clark, and I listened to the audio of Scarlett Johansson did for Audible. It's an exclusive recording, but if you have Amazon Prime, you can listen to it for free. So it's about like 2 hours. I watched the Disney movie many times growing up, and I really enjoy it. So I've been wanting to read the story, and yeah, it's almost just like the movie, just as crazy. And so I really enjoyed it, and Scarlett Johansson did a really good job with the voices. I was really impressed because I'm not really a big fan of hers. I recommend the audiobook, and I was really looking forward to the Cheshire Cat because he's my favorite, and he's just as crazy in the in the actual book than he is in the movie. And as I was listening to the audiobook, I was just picturing his giant grin. So yeah, I gave that 4 stars. So the 6th book I read this month was These Old Shades by Georgette Heger, and this is a historical romance set before the French Revolution, and it's about an English nobleman that is just walking down the street one day, and he runs into a little boy. Well, not a little boy, he's like maybe in his teens. He befriends this boy because he looks like a relation to his arch nemesis, and he decides to adopt him and raise him as his page in their high class society. And not a spoiler, it's in the blurb, but you find out that he is disguised as a boy and he's actually a girl. So for reasons I won't get into. So, and he tries to use her as to seek revenge on his arch nemesis. It was just okay. I had this audiobook for quite a while. I got it from Audible, and I remember I tried to listen to this maybe like a year ago, and I just lost interest and I stopped. And so I want to get through my audiobooks. I was just okay. And I heard a lot about this author. She wrote a lot of historical romances in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I don't know how long she was writing, but at least 20 years she wrote a lot of historical romances, and she's known for doing lots and lots of research. I wasn't that interested in the story, and I do have like 2 more of her physical books behind me that I might check out like one of these days. But yeah, this was just okay, so I gave it 3 stars. The 7th book I read this month was 10 Days in the Madhouse by Nellie Blythe, and this is a non-fiction account of an investigative reporter who in the late 1800s decided to investigate the madhouses in New York City. So I heard about Nellie Blythe from Bowery Boys podcast, is a history of New York podcast, and they did a whole episode on her, and so I wanted to read her story. And so she decided to fake being crazy, and so that she can be sent away to Blackwell Island, which is now Roosevelt Island, but at the time in the late 1800s it was just, they just kept crazy people there. And I say that because as you read her story, she finds out that they just sent pretty much anybody there that was strange. They even sent people that didn't know English, and it was just crazy that this was happening. So she decided to go into a boarding house overnight, and then just started acting strange, and people were freaked out by her, and they called the police. And in the story you find out that she started faking being crazy and stuff, and they ended up sending her to the island, and she was there for 10 days. And she just describes the horrible conditions there, and the really bad food, and they had no heat, and these poor people were complaining and that they needed heat, and the nurses there didn't care. They would abuse them and all this stuff. And because of her reporting, the city of New York changed the way they did things, and actually increased the budget so that people can have good food while they're there. And they're changed some of their policies so that they don't just send everybody there, they actually send the people there that need the help. So I was really blown away by this story, and I can't believe that she would do this, especially in the late 1800s, that she was a reporter when that wasn't ladylike to do. And I really want to check out some of her other writings. Penguin Classics came out with a collection of her writings that I really want to read. She also did Around the World in 80 Days. She wanted to travel around the world in 80 days, just like the Jules Verne book. So I think I want to first read that book, then read her book, and then there's actually a third book that somebody wrote a few years ago investigating this story. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. This is my favorite thing I read this month, and I don't usually give things 5 stars, so that's saying a lot. The 8th book I read this month was Crest by Mercy Meyer, and this is the 3rd in the Lunar Chronicle series, which is a YA science fiction series that's retelling of fairy tales. And Crest is a retelling of Rapunzel. I was really looking forward to reading this because I really enjoyed the first 2 books in the series, Cinder and Scarlet. It took me a while to get into this one because you had to be introduced to Crest in her story, so it felt like it was a little bit slow, but once you got to the halfway point, it really picked up, and the action was really good, and I really got sucked into the story. And yeah, I love Cinder, who's the main character in this series, so I always want to see more of her. I don't really care about the other characters except for Thorn, who clearly is Han Solo. But I love Han Solo, so yeah, that's why I enjoyed him. So I need to read Fairest, which is the next one in the series. Is a novella about Queen Lavanna, who's the villain in this series. So I'm looking forward to reading that next. Probably not until November because I have a lot on my TBR. So the 9th book and the final book I read this month was Sad Cyprus by Agatha Christie, and this is a Poirot novel. So this is number 31, I believe, or 21 in the series. And you don't need to read these in order because they're all standalone. But if you're gonna read the Poirot series or Miss Maple, I think that's the other series, you should at least read the first one just to be introduced to the characters. So I have read other Agatha Christie novels. I read And Then There Were None, and maybe 2 more of the Poirot series. I don't remember which ones, years ago. And so I wanted to get back into mysteries and check out more Agatha Christie novels. So Sad Cyprus is the story of this woman that is accused of poisoning another young woman because her fiance falls in love with her and breaks off the engagement. And this is the first time that I think from what I read, this is the first time that an Agatha Christie novel is set part way in a courtroom. And Poirot, it opens up in a courtroom, and then there's like a flashback to before the murder. You're just introduced to the characters. So I haven't read that many Agatha Christie's, as I said, but sometimes from what I've read, other people's reviews, they say that a lot of times she has many characters. You're not sure what's, like, who did what, but this story only had a handful of characters and wasn't that confusing to understand. And it did leave me guessing. I couldn't figure out who did the murder until they revealed it. So yeah, it's really good. And Poirot doesn't show up until like 40% into the novel. So I was like, when is this? When is he gonna show up? Like, this is his series. But yeah, he shows up and solves the case. Yeah, it's really good. So I gave it 4 stars, and I'm going to check out her other books in the future. So yeah, that's my first wrap up. I hope it went okay, and I'm looking forward to my October reads. I'm gonna do the Victober read along. If you haven't checked out my last video, you can see my TBR there, and I might do this bookathon later on in October. I think it only runs for a week, so I might read like 1 or 2 books for that, just because I might need a break from all my Victorian novels. Let me know in the comments below what you read this month, and if you read anything that I talked about, or if you're gonna check it out based on my review or not. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.